to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast. My name is Tracy Austin, and I am your host and the Chief Talent Officer here at Elevated Talent Consulting. And so often we have the opportunities to lead and we don't know what the heck we're doing. And so today we are having an amazing conversation about how do we inspire people to perform and how do we also inspire ourselves as we align with the mission, vision, and values of our organization and really use that as a litmus test. And I have an incredibly special guest with me today. Anna Kosova is with us, and Anna has been a client of ours for a year and a half now, Anna?
Yeah, about that time. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, Anna comes to us from Capital Association Management, and she is the director there, along with being very involved with many association management organizations across the country. So Anna, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Tracy. I look forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, we are thrilled to have you. And so I'm so curious. And I know you found us from actually listening to one of my podcasts. So tell me a little bit about what inspires you?
Yes, and I'm a very big fan of your podcast. And I think I've told you that many times now. What inspires me is to just go further every day and to never stop. And again, I just told you before we started this podcast that I started reading this Dare to Lead book. And it says, what's on your way needs to become your way. So whatever obstacles you have, just work through them and get to your goal. So my inspiration is to set the goal, whatever it is, small, big, challenging, easy, and get to that goal. Take whatever steps are necessary, but get to the end result. And that's what inspires me and keeps me going.
Amazing. And it was a couple months ago now, we did a workshop on really defining your organization's mission, vision, values, and what that specifically looked like inside of CAM, and also what that looked like for each individual person. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yes, it was very interactive, very fun experience. So I definitely recommend it to everybody. Part of the reason for conducting this workshop to formalize our company's mission, vision, and values was to really identify what sets of values is important to us individually, sets of values that are important to us as a team and as a company, and sets of values that are important to our current client associations or should be important to our prospective client associations. And part of the reason for conducting this workshop was to prepare the team to grow, because we were at the stage when we were ready to add more client associations to our portfolio. And for that, we also needed to identify an ideal client persona. And so if you remember, during this workshop, we've identified and confirmed to ourselves that we prefer to do full service association management, for example, as opposed to some outsourced services. Because when we work with client associations, we fully invest ourselves into that work. And so that's why we prefer to, manage all aspects of their association. We also identified the ideal size of the client based on their annual budget so that they're not too small for us or too big for us. And finally, we kind of identified the industry in which we're very experienced now. So we would prefer to work with client associations in the construction industry. However, there can always be one-offs, medical and other associations that we'd love to work for. But that was the idea of conducting the workshop, is to make sure everybody is set on the values, make sure everybody's agreed to who the ideal client persona is, and then we're all just going to row in one direction and pursue this business development strategy.
Yeah. And what was so phenomenal about this workshop, and there's a couple key points that I want to bring out, and really for our listeners, I want you to key into these, is when we know what winning looks like, we can all get behind that and row in the same direction, to use kind of that rowing analogy, versus somebody kind of poking holes in the boat. And what was really interesting throughout the workshop, and I did one-on-ones with each employee ahead of time, was there were so many of your staff that said, hey, I just want to make sure that I'm aligned with who we're bringing on, because there was some fear about, well, what if we bring on a client that isn't aligned to my personal values? And when we can clarify that, and here's who we are, here's what we stand for, and here's the why behind it, that quelled all those fears, which meant we're inspiring our staff because they know it's aligned with their personal values.
Exactly.
And so that was something that was key within that. And I think that the other thing that was really key to it is now they're all out looking for that ideal client for you, and knowing, guess what, we're full service. So they're getting all of us, and I don't have to separate myself between 20 different clients, because I'm building personal relationships. And this is an organizational value and a personal value.
It's all about the people. It's all about serving members and serving people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what were some of those results that you saw from those conversations?
So I think now that we're all on the same page in terms of our values, it is just much easier to, when you have some of those conversations with employees, it's much easier to bring it back. Okay, is this the results-oriented client association that we want to work with? Are we going to be resilient enough? Can we take on another project? Can we handle it? Respect is one of our values, right? We're going to be respectful to association, and that respect needs to be a two-way street. So it's so important to bring it back to those just three words, right? But they just mean so much to us now, and now we know what that means for us individually and for us as a company. So it was an incredible experience, and I thank you, Tracy, for helping us conduct it.
Absolutely. And what I love so much about this is now you have a litmus test and common language, that when you're, chatting with your staff, you're coming back to those core values, and hey, how are we fulfilling this against our mission as an organization, but also the mission of the organization that we're serving? And that allows us to celebrate the successes so much stronger and go, okay, so help me understand, does this align with our core value? And, because we agreed that this is what our agreements are, now it's much easier to have those conversations, and it doesn't feel like a parent-child conversation. It feels like an adult-to-adult values conversation where, oh, I guess I didn't see it that way. So now we're having a different conversation. Thoughts on how that showed up for you?
It was an eye-opening, but very interactive experience.
And so I'm curious as well. So we've talked a lot about what winning looks like. And this actually came out of, that values workshop, and then some of those one-on-ones, and what are the growth plans for your staff? So I'm curious, I just want to know, what are you doing with your staff so that they know, A, what winning looks like today, but also so that you're on the same page as they grow? That was 2 questions. So if we want to separate them, you can.
Yes, no, it's so important to really have those conversations about what the winning looks like. What is their talent pathway plan? Where do they see themselves in the next 3 to 5 years, within your company or outside of it? And again, what I've learned is, from talking to you, from listening to your podcast and reading other leadership books, it might be scary to have those fierce and open conversations with employees for both parties, for the employee and for me as a CEO. But that said, it's still so important to have those conversations often enough and not to neglect them, because you might just be able to catch an employee at the time when they're not happy or they're stuck or they feel misunderstood or whatnot, and turn it around and prevent that employee from leaving your company and make sure that that employee feels satisfied, fulfilled, and happy in the workplace. So it's just always important to have those conversations and follow up on those conversations. So when you talk, you document what you talked about, and then you follow up on them during the next discussion. Okay, how did we do on our goals or on what we agreed on during our last conversation? What went well? What didn't? How can we change it? Do you need more support from the leadership or your team members? Do you feel appreciated, again, by your management or by your team members? And I remember you also mentioned monthly coaching conversations you were talking about at one of the podcasts. And you mentioned that performance evaluation doesn't need to be once a year. It cannot be these days. You have to have these conversations often. And so this is what we do in our company. We have those coaching conversations, sometimes bi-monthly, but we say, okay, what are our goals for the next 2 months? What support do you need from me or your team members? And then look at your goals from previous period and tell me what worked and what didn't, and what can we do to make sure that we achieve our goals in the next period. So again, it's so incredibly important to have these conversations with your employees. And then I guess on another point.
So can I just stop for 1 second? So what is the outcome of those, bi-monthly check-ins been with your team?
Oh, it's been great. I mean, obviously, sometimes we set goals and we want to accomplish them, but then we have other multiple competing priorities, right, that come in place and we're unable to reach them, but we talk through them, right? So we talk through, okay, why we weren't able to, sign up X number of members in the last 2 months. Okay, maybe we were focusing more on the conference and we were putting all our resources to the conference, and we just didn't have time to do business development. But we will definitely focus on it during the next period, right? Or maybe an employee felt stuck and didn't quite understand the task. Maybe we didn't give him a full context of the project or of a particular task, and the employee felt stuck, and that's why it didn't work out. The certain goal wasn't reached. Or when we did reach certain goal, we celebrated, right? So when we reached more members, when we closed more members, for example, signed them up more than we were supposed to, we celebrated all. When we helped a client to do their reaccreditation with zero nonconformities, we celebrated in the office. So it's just important to really have those goals, document them, and then go back to them the next period and review them, and really have the again, open and honest conversation. What worked and why, so that we can continue to do that way. And then what didn't work and why didn't. You need more support, more dedicated time, whatever it might be. So
right.
That's what I can share.
And it almost sounds like the level of transparency increased, so that if there were mistakes being made, guess what? Not everyone on the team is making the same mistake, and we're celebrating the wins as a team as well. So
absolutely. Celebrating wins is so important because we work in such a busy environment that you have to stop and take a moment to celebrate some of those wins.
Right. And what I love about this is, we use the phrase what winning looks like, but sometimes it's like, well, what does winning look like? Right. And with the goals in those bi-monthly meetings, it's really clear what that outcome looks like of members or events or whatnot, versus an output, which may just be create a document. Well, if the output doesn't result in the outcome, that is a key issue. And so often in what winning looks like, we see that we're focused on outputs versus outcomes. So I love the transparency and the what winning looks like in the outcomes and the actual results.
Yes, absolutely.
And so you talked a little bit in my question, right, that was stacked. But you talked a little bit about talent pathway plans. So do you want to describe to our listeners how you define a talent pathway plan and how you've aligned your talent pathway plans with your mission, vision, values for your staff?
Sure. So we're still working on formalizing the talent pathway plan. And I guess, it's a little maybe more informal because we're a smaller company than in some large associations where you actually have an Excel spreadsheet or Word document, with all the goals documented, but we're getting there. But basically the talent pathway plan is when you explain to an employee and hear from an employee, what do they want to do in your company? Where do they see themselves in your company now, in a year, and in 3 years? And especially in a small organization, again, employees may feel like they've hit the ceiling, right? The career ceiling. If it's only 10 people in the company, it's hard to actually move up, right? So it's a job of the CEO to explain to the employee, okay, this is the vision I have for you. This is what I think you have a potential to be, right? And I will help you to get there. And this is how. And explain the career growth and the professional development growth for that employee. So, for example, I know you can become the next executive director. I know that you need to take a CAE, which is Certified Association Executive course, for example. I know you can be the next great project manager, and you just need to take the Project Management Institute exam, and you just need to have a little more client-facing experience. So once you explain your vision of the candidate of employees talent pathway and you get the buy-in, gentlemen, handshake, an agreement of some sort, that is the vision. But then, of course, you need to go back to it and constantly refine it. Is this still the goal for both the employee and the company? Maybe we brought another client, and this employee is now perfect for that client, right? And you didn't know it because you didn't have the client onboarded 6 months ago. So the talent pathway is something that needs to be identified, but it also needs to be looked at often and refined as needed.
Amazing. And what I love about the examples you just gave is that they're very specific and tangible, right? So there are tangible examples. And my guess is that there's also those intangible examples as well. For example, hey, the interaction you're having, with your internal team here at CAM versus the interactions that you're having with the association team needs to raise to this level. We need you shifting from tactical thinking to strategic thinking, and here's what that looks like. And it's one of those great things within the talent pathway plans is it's aligning what does the organization need with what does the person need, and can we align these together really to serve both so that the organization has the talent within to continue to grow and the plan for successions, retirements, all the things.
Absolutely. It has to be a win-win situation at the end of the day for all parties involved, for the employee, for the company, and for the client association.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really allows folks to shine and kind of move forward. And I think part of what this is, when we look at what's needed in some of those intangibles is, our listeners know that we're a huge fan of predictive index, and we use predictive index, so often in every day in what we're doing with what does the job need and what does the person need? Because if the job needs somebody that's, an independently driven leader that is also incredibly detail oriented, we need a person that matches that. And we also need to look at what team are they on and what is the strategy that team is executing? And do we have the right people on the team to execute that strategy? So I'm really curious when you start to look at employee kind of personalities and how it fits into what the teams need and what the job needs. How have you used that in alignment with kind of what we've talked about in our transparency and in our check-ins and in our talent pathway planning?
Of course. So we actually use DISC profile in our organizations, and there's a bunch of programs out there for personal assessments, personality assessments, but we use DISC for us. About 2 years ago, we conducted that workshop with our team, and it was Again, it was fun. It was interactive. It brought the team together. We learned so much about each of us, each of us individually, and about the team, right? About others. And it was very interesting. So, for example, I have one colleague on a team. He's a very detailed oriented person, right? So whenever I give him a project or a task, he prefers to receive full context. He prefers to know, why is this project important? What is the deadline? How is this associated with other projects and things like that? And I'm, on the contrary, the kind of person that gives you the big picture and expects you to fill in blanks. So by doing this assessment, now I try to remind myself that, okay, when I'm talking to this person, I really need to make an effort and provide more details. I'm probably not going to give you all the 20 bullets that you need, but maybe I can give you 10. And on the other side, my employee, he will remember to ask me if I didn't give him enough information. He can ask and say, hey, and I need a little more context here. And I'll be more than willing to provide that information. So bottom line, this personality assessment just helps to remove any miscommunications you might have or misunderstandings, because now you kind of know, okay, who prefers how much information or how much lead time. Maybe certain people don't like when a new task just sprung on them, and they like to receive something ahead of time, so they have really time to prioritize and look into a certain task instead of jumping from one task to another. So it's really important to understand those different personalities in the workplace and learn how to work with them and sort of compromise. And again, it's a two-way street, right? You got to learn how to compromise with them, and they also need to remember, that I'm a more of a big picture person, and they need to, compromise with me a little bit. So again, a win-win kind of with both sides.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. So I want to recap our conversation so far that we've had, because as we look to how do we inspire people to perform, right? Like, hey, same language, whether that is DISC or predictive index, whether that is mission, vision, values, we're aligned on that, whether that is what winning looks like, right? If we're going to inspire people to perform, we need to be on the same page as to what the expectations are. The next point that we really had around inspiring our people to perform with those is looking at, hey, what are our goals, and checking in to ensure that we stay aligned, and creating that long-term plan for both the organization and the employee within the talent pathway plans. Then, of course, using our people data to ensure that we're aligning that so that we can get our key results. And so with that, Anna, I'm curious, what takeaway do you have for executives listening into our conversation today?
So one key takeaway I would have for executives would be to find time to get to know your employees. Ask them for their feedback. Be ready and be prepared to take in that feedback, because it may be eye-opening. Thank them for providing you an open and honest feedback, because it's so important that employees speak up if they have any questions, concerns. And then make sure that, again, you talk about with your employees about what winning looks like for them, right? The talent pathway plan, especially in the small companies, when it's, the employees may hit that ceiling and may not understand, okay, where do I move from this, right? And it's a job of the CEO to really explain to the employee, okay, this is the vision I have for you. These are your career growth opportunities and professional growth opportunities.
And an organization your size does not have a human resources person in it. However, a lot of our listeners do, and you wear an HR hat. So what's a key takeaway that you have for HR professionals listening into our conversation today?
Yes, the company of our size doesn't have a dedicated, full-time HR professional on staff, but we work with you to help us implement some of the HR policies, and I wear an HR hat often. But what I would say is hang in there, because it's it becomes much harder to retain good employees for various reasons. Sometimes employees may want to try themselves in different industries and different jobs, or they may want to have a greater benefits package that's currently available. So HR professionals need to get more creative. But at the end of the day, it has to be a win-win situation, again, for both parties, to make sure that employees feel satisfied and fulfilled in the job, but also the company remains profitable and offers great customer service to its clients.
Great. Anna, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you just for the amazing opportunity and privilege to serve CAM and your staff.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you. We appreciate working with you.
Absolutely. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.